times of trouble, we never could have come this far. I took the good times, I'll take the bad times, I take you just the way you are.
Welcome back to the show for Caregivers About Caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. I am Peter Rosenberger, bringing you 3 decades of experience to help you stay strong and healthy as you take care of someone who is not. And John, rarely in my years of doing this have I run into someone whose book, whose story, whose manner of expressing himself captured me like our guest today, Governor Martin Schreiber, former governor of Wisconsin, who has written a book called My Two Elaines, Learning, Coping, and Surviving as an Alzheimer's Caregiver. And he talks about his journey with this as he comes to grip with the love of his life. And they met in school, like in high school.
Oh, wow.
And it's a beautiful love story. And here's a man who has opened up his chest and let the world see his heart in this. So, Governor, are you with us?
I'm here, Peter. Good afternoon. And my gosh, what an honor. An honor for me to be talking with you. Thank you.
Sir, I got to tell you, I was reading your book, and it was almost too much for me because I felt like you were just peering into my soul. And that is, John's known me for a long time, and I've been a caregiver for a long time. And it's rare that I run into somebody like you who just has this grasp of the journey like you have, and the way you have resolutely just faced this thing. And I'm just grateful. And I want to jump right into this book. It's a very good book. And if you are dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's in your life right now, I would really recommend this book, My Two Elaines. But here's a quote. And, John, I want you to listen to this quote from the book. I just want you to listen to this. Governor, I want to read this. But I'd be kidding myself. Alzheimer's is not a tuna casserole disease. It's a years-long illness, traumatic for both the person with the disease and the caregiver, with no happy ending this side of heaven.
That sounds like a show I know.
I have said these things.
We even make fun of tuna casserole.
I just had a blog post called "You Can't Drive a Tuna Casserole to Work," and here you are. You've said this, and you have really, Governor, you've done something extraordinary in this book. Talk about that a little bit. It's not a tuna casserole disease. It's a years-long illness, traumatic for both the person with the disease and the caregiver, with no happy ending this side of heaven. Talk a little bit about that. Unpack that for us.
Well, I think it begins with, if Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse. And I go one step further, and the converse of that is, rather than worrying about the storm to pass, to try and learn how to dance in the rain. And no caregiver is ever going to dance in the rain. But in unpacking this for you, gosh, I went through this, and there were so many things I learned too late, so many things I didn't learn soon enough. And then as I regretted missing out on those moments of joy because I tried to do it alone and because I didn't understand the disease, it just weighed on me so heavily that if I learned anything on this journey, if it would be possible for me to share with others what this journey is like so they don't make the same mistakes, so that maybe they can look for and find moments of joy that ordinarily would be passed up because we don't understand the disease and we don't understand, and again, no caregiver is going to dance, but to try and learn more about the disease so we can have those moments of joy and maybe even find time to have just a little bit of dance.
That's exactly what we have been saying on this show for some time, and I'm just marveling listening to you say these things because it is so refreshing to hear somebody with your level, with your stature, with your experience to come alongside and echo this for us. We just finished in the last segment talking about the importance of a caregiver's heart. Caregiver's heart beats for two, and your heart took a beating. I want you to give that wake-up call to folks right now who are thinking they can white-knuckle this, what it meant to you, what the stress did to you, and then what you did about it.
Well, just terrible stress. One of the things I learned, and I've got to share this with everyone, and that is that not all of the Army's marching, not all of the Navy sailing, not all of the beer that's brewed, and not all of the whiskey that's distilled is going to take anything away, is going to make it easier, is going to stop this disease. So as one begins to understand it, then I think you get to the next position of saying, okay, if I can't stop this disease, what is the best thing I can do for myself and for my loved one? And that is to understand the disease better and to know that you cannot argue with Alzheimer's. So don't try and convince yourself you're going to convince the person who is ill that they shouldn't have 5 coats on, for example. And also what you have to learn, what I had to learn, why I call it Two Elaines, is there is no way that I could go back and in dealing with my wife with Alzheimer's, that I could go back to the first Elaine and expect the same kind of conversation, the same kind of involvement, the same kind of interaction. So I've got a second Elaine now to love, maybe in quite a different way, but a second Elaine to share my life with. And I could only devote my time to the second Elaine if I let go of the first Elaine. Because as long as I was loving 2 people, I was expecting something of each of them, which was impossible for each of them to do or to act or to complete.
Well, and you refer to yourself as a widower in the process. I mean, you've had to say goodbye to the love of your life and care for this brand new person that emerged because of this disease. And the journey was a little bit bumpy for you. You got a chapter in here called Irrational Irritability. Talk a little bit about that.
Like the arrogance that I had in thinking that I could do it alone. And so the more I thought I could do it alone, the more self-centered I began to be, because as a man, no one is going to tell me I'm going to accept defeat. No one is going to tell me I can't take care of my wife. And because of the constant change, with caregiving, and I found a lot of guilt of caregivers as a side note. One of the reasons for this guilt of caregivers, and first of all, they got to get rid of it. But one of the reasons is you try so hard. You try to do your very best, and the disease beats you every day. And when I say that, no matter how hard you try, your loved one is not going to get any better. And so that wears on you psychologically. It wears on you to an emotional extent that it impacts on your health. And as you begin to feel the world closing in on you as caregiver, that irrational irritability began. And my gosh, I regretted, and I had to buy flowers and candy for more people than I would ever want to admit, because I wasn't smart enough to get help. I was so intent on taking care of things myself that, again, it affected Peter, my mind, my thought process, and I felt the world closing in on me, and I was almost like a trapped lion, just ready to snare out at anybody who would give me any grief, and they never gave me grief. It was all in my head. But the point is, you can't do it alone. You have to accept the disease for what it is and try and look to understand what is happening. And one of the things, just quickly, that I discovered, and that is what I call therapeutic fibbing. And yes, I had that irrational irritability, and as I began to understand more about the disease, I began to understand. My wife, Elaine, asked me how her parents were, and when I told her they were both dead, the shock on her face, because she thought she hadn't properly said goodbye or taken care of them. And now she asked me how her mom and dad are. I said, they're fine. They're happy. They're working at church, and they love to do that, and you know how happy. Oh, she said, that makes me so pleased. And so, yes, the irrational irritability, but then also once you can master the fact that you're an excellent caregiver, no human being in the world can do it alone, and get rid of that guilt, I think then you can start focusing on how you can help look for and find, hopefully, those moments of joy.
Well, we talked about this in the last segment about how important is it, and sometimes we as caregivers find ourselves getting embroiled in arguing over facts. And you and Elaine have had this journey where you would argue over, whether you went to a seafood place or a steakhouse, and these flashpoints that come up, and then you had to back away and realize, how important is this that I get this, convince her of this. She doesn't want to be convinced of it, and it's okay. And you really opened up your chest and said, you showed so much of your heart in this. I was stunned. And so talk a little bit about that as you learn to back away from the disease, instead of going one-on-one with the disease, and back away from it and redirecting. And redirecting is a big part of what you talk about in this.
Oh, yes. Redirecting is very important, but a couple of things just quickly. One is you cannot argue with this disease. If Elaine has 5 coats on and she says she's cold, there's no way that I can convince her intellectually she has enough coats on. And so what is so important is to join their world. By gosh, if she's cold with 5 coats on, okay, Elaine, here's another coat now. How do you think that the sun is shining today? And just to get to the points of the redirection. And then I also found taking no out of my vocabulary. Elaine wants a glass of wine in the morning. It's 9:30. If I say, no, you can't have one, well, why? Who said so, so forth? So, Elaine, you want a glass of wine? Okay, do you want it in a larger glass or in a smaller glass? Do you want it do you want red wine or do you want white wine? And should we drink it with our neighbors, or should we call up one of your sisters and have them come over? And so what happens then is, as their mind is just so focused on the very moment, that's what their mind is focused on. And as their mind is focused on the moment, and you can redirect their mind into another direction. If Elaine wakes up and she says she's got bugs on her, I say, Elaine, there's no bugs on you. No. If you go to Harvard Business School and you pay $100,000 a year for tuition, and you're running a consumer relations class, customer relations, the first, empathize. Oh, Elaine, that's got to feel terrible if you've got bugs on. Let's go into the other room and get some light on that and really look at it. Okay, now we avoid the argument. I don't have to tell her no, which I try to eliminate from my vocabulary. And then we walk into another room and, look at, and there's a picture of the kids. What do you think of that? And, look at that knickknack and so forth. And see, the thing is, not only does it impact on my life to understand I don't use the word no, but it also makes Elaine feel so much better. You tell anyone no, you can't do something, whether it's a glass of wine at 9:30 in the morning or wanting to skydive out of an airplane. Elaine, there's an idea to jump out of an airplane. That's you and I put that on our bucket list, and remember that for next time we think about wanting to do things. All right, we solved it. Now we move on to the next. And I admire so much, Peter, what you're doing. I admire so much about how you are helping caregivers, because I think it's one of the most, if not the most difficult job in the world. And if people can understand that they should get help and that they can't do it alone, they can understand a few basic rules like don't argue with the disease, accept the person's life as they are, join their world. I think it's just going to make a big, significant difference in the health of a caregiver of an Alzheimer's patient. Has a better chance of becoming sicker, of dying earlier, of having their savings disappear than a caregiver for another type of disease. And part of that is because of the fact you work so hard and you try and make it perfect, but because the disease is so regressive, of the top 10 diseases, of the top 10 killers, Alzheimer's is number 6, but it's the only one of the top 10 that cannot be cured, prevented, or delayed. And so once we understand that also that horrible prognosis, once we understand that, well, okay, now what do we do? Well, rather than worrying about the storm to pass, to try and learn how to dance in the rain, and we try and learn how to dance in the rain by understanding Alzheimer's disease. And again, I get to the point, if Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse, so we've got to understand to join the person's world of our loved one who's ill.
Well, one of the things, and I don't think I'm overstating this, Governor, but you stated that when you reached, finally, it took you a while, you said, to reach out to the Alzheimer's Association. It really saved your life.
Well, it did. To say they talked me off the ledge or the cliff may be just a little bit of an overstatement, but see, it was affecting my life, Peter, my health, and if ignorance of the disease is worse than Alzheimer's, ignorance of the disease also by the medical profession. Now, I'm not condemning them. All I'm saying is if we can have the medical profession understand when there is a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, it's understanding to know that there are 2 patients. And I was going through every kind of test you could imagine. I had trouble breathing. Was it COPD? Too much fluid in the body? Was it this? Was it that? If we could have stepped back and said, wait a minute, what's going on in your life? You could be grieving. You could be going through depression. You could have a lot of anxiety, and we've got to factor those things in to our diagnosis and into our treatment.
And you had all three of them. You had all three of those things.
Did. Sure. And if we could have factored that in at the time we were going through all of this, it would have made a difference. And I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. I'm just saying, hey, my dear loving caregivers, you heroes, if you can understand you can't do it alone, if you know it's going to take a toll on your life just because of the disease itself, take care of yourself. And, what do they say when you get on an airplane? Put on your own oxygen mask first. And in my book, I found a series of notes before I went to press and diaries that Elaine had kept. And so I tried to incorporate them into the book. And you will note in looking at some of her diaries or notes how gracious she is to me. And I did not put that in for self-grandizement. I put that in there so the caregiver can understand how much their loved one depends upon them to be healthy. Because when I was getting worn down, it got to the point where I was really of no use to anybody. I was shorter with Elaine and my patients. I wasn't helping myself if I would go to the store and became irrationally irritable. Wasn't able to have the perspective of the kinds of things I might be doing otherwise. So, and I know it's not easy. I can't sit here, Peter, and say that this is easy. Just take care of yourself. Just learn how to dance in the rain. All of those take a lot of work, but it's worth it.
It does. It does indeed. Listen, we got to go to a quick break. Can you hang on through the break? I got one more question for you. Can you hang on just a little bit through the break? We're talking with Governor Martin Schreiber, former governor of Wisconsin. His book, My Two Elaines, and learning, coping, surviving as an Alzheimer's caregiver. He understands the journey. I think you can hear that in his voice, the authority, the wisdom, the hard-earned wisdom. There's more to come. Don't go away. This is Peter Rosenberg. We'll be right back.
I'm Gracie Rosenberg. 20 years ago, I walked for the first time on 2 artificial legs, and I'll never forget that day. That day, I not only walked, but I happened to see a documentary about Princess Diana's work with amputees in Southeast Asia. Watching her with people who now looked just like me, I knew in my heart God was calling me to reach fellow amputees with practical help through prosthetic limbs and the life-changing message of the gospel. Since 2005, we've done just that through Standing with Hope. It's the evangelical prosthetic limb outreach my husband Peter and I founded. By training and equipping local workers in developing countries, we are changing lives one leg at a time. We also collect used limbs, and we work with inmates at a local prison. They volunteer to disassemble the limbs in order to recycle the usable parts. A woman with a broken body working with broken lives in a prison to reach other broken lives in order to point to the one who was broken for us. That's what's happening every day at Standing with Hope, and we invite you to participate with us. Go to standingwithhope.com, please, and learn how you can get involved. I'm Gracie Rosenberg, and by God's grace, I am Standing with Hope.
For more information, visit standingwithhope.com.
I know there will be sorrow. We'll face that somehow. But my hands can't hold tomorrow. I can only hold you now.
Welcome back to the show For Caregivers, About Caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. This is Peter Rosenberg, bringing you over 3 decades of experience to help you stay strong and healthy as you take care of someone who is not. And we're glad you're with us. 800-688-9522. 800-688-9522. If you want to be on the show, you can follow along on Facebook Live, Caregivers with Hope. And you can always go out to caregiverswithhope.com and submit a question. If you're taking care of somebody right now and you don't want to call in, we have that a lot. We always take questions, and then we'll do a section on listener mail and so forth, and then you can always post them. We're serious about this. We are bringing you as much information as we can to strengthen you along the journey. And right now I have on the phone with me Governor Martin Schreiber from Wisconsin, former governor of Wisconsin, also state senator. He was a lieutenant governor there as well. Wrote a book called My Two Elaines, and it's Learning, Coping, and Surviving as an Alzheimer's Caregiver. And he has opened up his chest, his heart, his life, so that you could see into the reality of this journey, particularly as a caregiving husband. And I would very much like to revisit some things you talked about a minute ago, Governor. Two things. One of them is therapeutic fibbing. I had a friend of mine telling me that she was taking care of an older lady, and she asked about her husband. Her husband had passed away, and she said, well, Frank's dead. And she was reliving that at that moment. The moment she told her that, it was like you had just told her for the first time. And it was crushing to her. I mean, it truly crushed her. And so they had to go back and learn how to say, well, he's not here right now, or he stepped away for a little bit, kind of thing. And then caregivers feel so guilty for saying those kinds of things, but you're protecting them from this horrible disease. Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, it is protecting them from that horrible disease. And that's, you get to that therapeutic fibbing, and it is so difficult as a caregiver to readjust your life. And to think about having to let go of your first loved one so you can better embrace the new person, your new loved one. And, Peter, I was talking with a woman who was a caregiver, and one of the patients wanted to go rob a bank. And they said, okay, let's have a cup of coffee first. Okay, well.
Yeah, let's plan this out.
And so now they were ready to move on. So the therapeutic fibbing, or joining their world, and I guess that would be the best word, therapeutic fibbing, but it's really joining their world and helping them be who they are right now.
Well, Governor, you'd mentioned that earlier that they live moment to moment in this disease, and if all they have is the individual moments for the rest of their lives, having really nice ones might probably be a way to look at it.
Oh, sure. Well, and again, the book I wrote the book because my heart just went out to people when I would see them argue with their loved one, and I would see the anxiety that was building up on both sides, and how you can just diffuse the situation by understanding. Here's what I think happens in the life of a person with Alzheimer's. If you can envision yourself taking a funnel and putting a small part of the funnel by your eye and looking up, and as the funnel expands, you can see the blueness of the sky and the hope of tomorrow. Now, what happens as this disease progresses, that funnel becomes inverted. So now the larger part is by your eye, and you look out, and all you see is that small hole of the funnel. That's their world. And just, I don't know if we have time for a quick story, but this woman said, she's like in her early or late 40s, and she got a call from her mom. Her mom says, please come quick, Dad's got Alzheimer's and he's acting really strange. So she said she rushed home, and sure, here her dad was in the middle of the living room acting like he was fishing, like he was casting without a rod, of course, and without a reel and without a line. And she says, Dad, what you doing? He says, I'm fishing. Well, what do you fish? I'm fishing for a walleye. Well, she said, can I join you? And okay. So she said she stood there, acting like she was fishing and sort of talking. And she told me that was one of the best experiences that she had in exchanging heart to heart with her dad over a period of time that she could remember. So now it's time, the episode is over and she's leaving. Her mom says, what do I ever do if this happens again? And she said, Mom, get in the boat with him. In other words, join their world.
I love that. And I as long as you don't want to, I know you guys up in Wisconsin like to ice fish. So if he brings an auger into the house and wants to tear up the floor, we got two problems now. But that's see, you've said this. That's the theme, and we only got a little bit of time left. So I want to just squeeze this in. You've said that many, many times. Join their world. And it's so important to understand the world that is collapsing in on them, that is being reformed because of this disease. And what we do is we're trying to force them into a world that they can no longer live in. And you've taken the opposite turn. You're saying, no, let's gently allow them that world, and let's not force them anywhere, and let's not force ourselves anywhere, and let's just let it be what it's going to be. And this is the message that comes through, just leaps off the pages of this book. And we're about out of time here, and I just can't tell you how grateful I am that you took the time to call today and share your wisdom and your heart and your insights with these listeners. It's a great gift, Governor. And the book is My Two Elaines. In 10, 15 seconds, a parting shot.
Well, first of all, thank you. I admire greatly what you're doing. My Two Elaines is a website. You can order the book through there, but it's all one word. But my parting shot is my gratitude to you, Peter, and to your wife for what you're doing, and God bless the caregivers. May they understand that they're heroes and get rid of any guilt they might have.
What a way to end. Listen, Governor Martin Schreiber, former governor of Wisconsin, sharing his heart. This is what this show is all about. You want to see more, go out to caregiverswithhope.com, caregiverswithhope.com. This whole segment was brought to you by Standing with Hope. Caregivers with Hope is the family ministry of Standing with Hope. And we are so grateful. Go to standingwithhope.com if you want to participate. You see all of our programs we have through prosthetic limbs, through our prison program with Core Civic, with inmates recycling prosthetic limbs. It's all there. Healthy caregivers make better caregivers. Today's a great day to be a healthy caregiver, and we'll see you next week.